We are here today with Ali Ciger from Pfizer, who will present how big pharma like Pfizer is cooperating with other healthcare stakeholders to fight the crisis. Ali is the commercial director for pain in Pfizer in Germany. He is also an investor and an advisor for an AI company based in Berlin. Ali, thank you for being here with us today.
Ladislav, thanks a lot for the invite. Glad to be part of the conversation.
So we invited you to give us your perspective as a Pfizer commercial director on understanding the strategies for big pharma fighting the COVID-19 pandemic. So how do you see the role of biopharma in tackling the current pandemics, seeking the way out of the crisis and beyond?
Yeah, thanks a lot. So I think to comment on the role of biopharma, we should first take a step back and look at the major impacts or the major changes that the whole situation poses on the society in which we live in which pharma actually exists, the ecosystem. The first impact is, I think, an awakening regarding the science to develop a vaccine and a treatment and all of the evidence requirements around it. And the second one is, again, I think it's an awakening regarding the value of health and being healthy, right? I think those two aspects bring in a lot of spotlight into biopharma companies. And I mean it in a very positive way. It's so huge that I could say I never experienced such a thing in all of my career. And because like previously when pharma was under spotlight, it was more on the cost of an intervention rather than the value of an intervention, right? So under this ecosystem, I think what pharma is doing in terms of strategies during the crisis, I think there are two of them. One of them is obviously to deliver the treatments and vaccines to the patients who are in need all around the world. It is, I should say, easier said than done, considering the supply chain being quite complex and interdependent, as well as the demand could be quite volatile these days. And the second one, obviously, to be part of or to find a solution to this problem, to the virus. It could be either through a vaccine, it could be either finding a new molecule, or it could be through repurposing an existing treatment to this new indication, right? And I think those are kind of the only options as a society we have to, move forward to the next normal. Obviously, there is the third aspect, which is to keep the employers safe, but it is not pharma specific. So I think like it's not worth mentioning or going deep into that. So that's during the crisis. Well, after the crisis, I think it will be a different game for sure. And I don't want to be prescriptive because I don't think we know for sure what would happen. So I think we should approach it with more questions rather than answers. And I particularly have two questions in my mind. One of them is related to the experience of patients. How would it change? Like the whole patient journey, how would that change? To be specific, for example, would the patients like the prescriptions to be delivered to their home, the adaptation of telemedicine, other digital health solutions, etc. These are fundamental shifts. I think biopharma can and should play an active role in shaping this new patient journey for the better. And the second one would be around the physician interactions. Basically, as physicians are now redefining kind of their role or their interactions with the patients, they would probably do the same with other stakeholders, including biopharma companies. And I think we should find new and meaningful ways to interact and to collaborate with physicians that are out there helping the patients.
Thank you. So definitely there's a vision and on the current and on the future to come. When we look at the current situation, what corporations in biopharma do you see that are in place already that are bringing tangible results or are on the brink of bringing new products to the market?
Yeah, well, I think that's a very important aspect of the situation right now. first of all, I mean, we all know it, but I think it's important to emphasize bringing a new product to the market is a very complex process. You have to have access to cutting edge science and scientists. You have to have the scope to generate the relevant evidence. You have to have the experience and diligence to comply with all of the regulatory requirements and market access conditions. And you have to have the scope to produce the solution at scale. All of these steps are resource intensive, and pharma model is just built to make this possible. However, what is different right now is, I think, there's the time pressure, right? So each and every day, unfortunately, there are thousands of patients losing lives to this condition. And in such a case, you cannot waste the time. Like every day you spend, you have to think twice if you are working in biopharma these days. So I think that is kind of a big motivation for collaboration. And there are, I think, remarkable examples across the industry, and I will just name a couple of them. First, for example, there is a consortium of big pharma companies, I think around 15 of them, together with NGOs like Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and they're opening up their proprietary knowledge of some compounds in terms of safety and efficacy that could be helpful for the others as well. I haven't experienced such a thing before. Another example is, for example, GSK and Sanofi collaborating, like two big players collaborating for a new vaccine. One of them has expertise in recombinant DNA, the other one more expertise in adjuvants, so potentially a good match, right? Pfizer has a collaboration with a German biotechnology company, BioNTech. But beyond that, for example, for Pfizer, I can say that there was the moment they announced that they could potentially shift the production line and spare the current excess manufacturing capacity of Pfizer if there would be other companies to, find the solution first. I think that was very remarkable, right? And it is, again, it is quite unusual as well. And I think maybe as a last point from biopharma, like again, big players like Pfizer and Merck and Lilly, they announced that the medical expertise in the company, the physicians working for these companies are free to volunteer their services to the communities that they live in. I think it's again a good example of collaboration with other companies and with the society in which we live in. But I don't think it is only biopharma. There are also examples with, let's say, non-traditional healthcare stakeholders. Like just a couple of days ago, it was announced that I think 26 CROs, contracted resource organization, and data analytics companies, like big players like SAS, Elsevier, etc., they are collaborating to build a secure patient-level database to be open to public health research anonymously, obviously. And obviously, there's another example of Apple and Google collaborating together for Bluetooth-based solution to keep track of infections. Like, these are all remarkable, and I think the level of collaboration is just second to none. And I think that spirit makes me just hopeful these days.
Yes, you can see that there's many changes happening in the past couple of weeks we haven't thought that would happen in years.
Yeah.
So we see a lot of new development, as I said, in the field of new vaccine generation, a lot of R&D projects, clinical trials opening up. The question is also, what will remain after the crisis when we see some major developments in COVID-19 subsiding? So what is your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think that's the $1 million question, right? I mean, what happens with the pandemic would stay with the pandemic, or will it stick? And I think the honest answer is we don't know. My perspective is, like, there are two extremes, right? One extreme is what we are witnessing right now, and probably one extreme was what we were witnessing a year before. My perspective, the truth would lie somewhere in between. Just to give how diverse these two extremes are, I will just name a couple of examples once more. Let's talk about vaccines, for example. Like previously, the industry benchmark to develop a vaccine was around, like, on average, 8 to 10 years. And now we are talking about 12 to 18 months, which is optimistic, but still probably possible. Then hopefully what happens if a company develops a vaccine in 18 months? Is that the new industry benchmark, or will we just discard it as an outlier? Once more, like, we don't know, but probably somewhere in between, right? And then there's the aspect of, let's say, policymakers and the governments intervening in healthcare. Major governments around the world are developing healthcare apps to track the infections. So after the pandemic is over, will these apps be discarded? Or will the next step is to develop it even further? Like, why not, if you have an app, why not track the other infections? Why not track vaccinations, etc.? And, you know, these are very different options that we were not thinking, as you said, a couple of months before. Or consider patients. Like, it was always thought that healthcare consumerism to be more of a US thing, and the European continent could be like lagging behind, etc. Or the use of wearables, other sensors, mobile health technologies is sometimes perceived as a niche. However, now it's an integral part of the whole system, right? What would all these experiences of patients and physicians through telemedicine, using the apps, etc., how will it change the interaction, right? Will it be, the next normal would be a patient having an initial diagnosis, visiting the physician, and then, you know, how will that change the whole game? So, like, once more, I think we don't know the answer. So this is a complex system, this is a non-linear system, and this is a non-reversible system. So it is, I think, for sure that the next normal would be different, but how different would depend on, I think, how policymakers would respond, how public, the patients would respond, and how market players like biopharma, physicians, associations would respond. I think that would be the next normal. So we will see how much of this agility would stick and how much of it is just for the pandemic.
There's a lot to expect and a lot to look forward to in the development of the things. So Ali, thanks a lot for being with us here today, and look forward to seeing you in our future events.
Thanks for the invitation. Thank you.